Folks, before I start the regular intro, I just want to throw something out to you. The channel, thanks to all of you, has reached 20,000 subscribers. It's absolutely mind-boggling to me. This is a hobby, and fortunately enough for me that a lot of you enjoy my hobby, and I have absolutely loved the past couple I've done. The old school surplus stuff, aka the stuff I used when I was in. The comments from those videos have been it's beyond awesome. I have loved reading every single one of them, from veteran to non-veteran alike. All of the insight you've been putting into these things, it's been wonderful. It has been a beautiful learning experience for me. It's been brotherhood and fellowship like I never thought that I'd find through the comments of my videos. I've been in cloud nine. It's been wonderful, and I'm going to continue to do a bunch of these old school things until I run out of stuff to do, or I find a necessity to throw something else in there in between. But I just wanted to thank you from the bottom of my heart. God bless you. May He keep you and comfort you. And I appreciate you more than words can say. But one request is that any of you that still have in your mind or on paper the loadouts that you had for both your LBE or your rucksack, share them with me. I used to have, you know, the printouts and things like that, the horrible printouts. They were mimeograph printouts, but you know, I have no idea where those are now. And when I was trying to, you know, get a load out for my ruck, I couldn't really remember where certain things went. Maybe I left a few things out, maybe I put a couple of things in that I never did when I was in. So if you could share those loadouts with your LBE and your rucksack with me. I mean, I don't care if it's from World War II all the way up to present date. If you could share those with me, I'd really enjoy reading them, and I know I would learn a lot. Well, on with the show. Howdy folks, welcome back to Boondockery. This is my third official installment on the Jumping on the Old School Bandwagon, covering all kinds of vintage GI surplus, aka stuff I used when I was in the Army. Today's video is going to be focusing on bivouacking with the pup tent. Well folks, it's 93 degrees in beautiful southeastern Ohio, high humidity, and for old broken down men like me, it kicks my butt. I can't deal with the heat like I used to. But today's video we're going to be focusing on the pup tent. And the pup tent in various forms has a very, very long history. The pup tent's basically an A-frame canvas shelter. They've used A-frame canvas shelters all the way back to the times of the Romans. And here in the good old US of A, we started off with wedge tents that would sleep approximately 5 to 6 people in the American Revolution, and it has not stopped since. As a matter of fact, the term pup tent more than likely comes from the Civil War. And their pup tents were a good bit larger than the one I'm holding here, accommodating more like the Revolutionary War versions. And it reminded them of dog houses because they were dogs of war. And like any GI, it doesn't matter. There is most of the time that you serve, you're treated like a dog. And so the term pup tent came out of that time period, I believe. Now, I don't think there's anything officially in writing, but in correspondences that folks made when they were in the Civil War, there was terms used to refer to their tents as pup tents. That was one of the huge differences between this American Civil War and the American Revolution. During the American Revolution, approximately 25% of the population were literate, and by the time we get up to the Civil War, you're looking at close to about 60% of the American population being completely literate. So when we look for answers in history, the best place to look is through first-hand correspondences and journals. Getting back on task, the pup tent that I have here, that I used while I was in the United States Army, is the same variation that was created toward the beginning of the Vietnam conflict, Vietnam War, and has pretty much remained unchanged up to the point it was replaced by individual tents as opposed to a two-person tent, like the Woodland Camouflage, I believe it's a Katoma, and there were a couple companies that made them. They made one that had flexible poles. They made one that it rolls up, it sticks in a little pouch, and when you take it out and you throw it, ba-doing, it sets up all by itself. All you have to do is put a couple poles on it after that, and just for your rain fly. And today, USGIs are blessed with the absolutely fantastic one-person and also two-person and also three-person light fighter tents. This tent right here was issued to me, well, not this very tent, but the same style of tent was issued to me while I was first in basic training. And apart from basic training, we rarely ever use these when I was with my regular units. About the only time we ever used them is when we were bivouacking, getting ready to go out into the field for a month-long training exercise. Remember one field problem we went to, we were going to go to White Sands Missile Range to train all through that area, beautiful area. But we had the railhead at Fort Bliss, Texas. And it's a good little haul from there. And where the railhead was going to be, it was close to an old abandoned part of Fort Bliss, probably from World War II. And they were having us bivouac with our beautiful pup tents in a huge gravel area that used to be a motor pool. Well, sleeping these things in the woods, when you have an occasional stick you have to readjust or get rid of, or a rock, that's one thing. But when there is no way to escape rocks and a great big gravel motor pool, that was not fun. So I got my platoon together and we explored some of the areas of the old abandoned part of Fort Bliss, and we took up residence in one of the old abandoned buildings. And we always made sure that we were back in time to be able to get up, you know, for formation and everything else. But yeah, not exactly the best thing on gravel. More than likely, if you're an old fart like me, you received your shelter half in the same manner in which this is set up. When I went through CIF, a lot of us received pup tents, shelter halves that looked exactly like this, and then others received everything brand new in plastic bags and paper wrappers, the lucky sods. But anyway, this manner of which to store your pup tent inside your ruck is actually pretty dang efficient and handy and dandy. Keeps everything where it's supposed to be, as compact as you pretty much can, keeping it all together. And I will show you how to re-roll this at the end of the video. Okay, here we go. I got all of that on the camera. Now, the shelter half, of course, is what's rolled up around the poles and the tent stakes. You have 5 tent stakes and 3 of these interconnecting poles. This is very much old school, and it works to this day. Now granted, there are other materials that are probably much more resilient, and they will not break like wooden ones, but it's, oh wait a minute, oh that is so cool, you gotta see this. Don't know how well you can see this, but the date on this is 1983, which was during the time that I was actually in the Army. Yeah, the things that excite a nostalgic old man. Anyway, this is all you need for your shelter half, including, can't forget, the rope. Now this is the canvas shelter half. Technically, this half can be combined with another half, and using field expedient means, you could make your own poles to erect the tent, and you can also use field expedient means to create tent stakes for the stakeout portions. So technically you wouldn't need one of these fancy dancy poles or any of those stakes. However, that's what comprises of a complete shelter half system. Now, from this peak to this peak down here, that is approximately 12 foot 5 inches. And I say so because canvas has a tendency of shrinking. So if you measure yours, I just measured mine. This is fairly new. It may shrink just a little bit, but that's why I'm saying approximately. From this end to this end here is 4 foot 9 inches, almost 5 feet across. Now, along what would be considered the top portion of the shelter half is pairs of two-sided snaps. This enables you to snap together 2 halves to create 1 tent, and when they overlap, they prevent rain from blowing in and just makes it much more weatherproof On the bottom areas, you have ropes going through grommets, which you would use those to stake out the tent. This is a canvas piece, and just like any canvas, even though it's treated with a water-resistant barrier on inside and out, it can soak in a continuous rain. And if you're inside of it and you touch the inside of the tent, more than likely, depending on how well worn it is, it's going to leak in that spot that you touched it. Like I said, we rarely ever use these things. Probably maybe 10 times after I was out of basic training, and almost always it was just a bivouac before we went on an extended field problem, and I was armored cav, so we never used these, at least not for a tent. Now, I never once set one of these things up by myself. I mean, you require 2 people, 2 shelter halves. So every single time that we set these things up for a bivouac, a little miniature tent city, what have you, there was always 2 people there. So I did a little looking around on YouTube just to see what other people are doing as far as pup tents go. And very few of them had ever used a pup tent in the military. They're not veterans. They just thought this was a really cool, novel thing, and they wanted to do their thing with it. Well, lo and behold, there's like a way for one person to set this booger up. So I'm going to be using that method to set this thing up, even though I never once used it when I was in the military. There was no need. Always had 2 people because you had to have 2 shelter halves. None of us owned 2 of these things. Now, there's been sort of a popular craze with these old surplus canvas shelters. The Lavu is one that I'm certain a lot of you watching this have enough Lavus to create a couple different kind of shelters. And if nothing else, you have at least one to create, you know, a 2-person shelter, which I think is 2 Lavus. But all of those things that are, I guess, multi-purpose like the Lavu, this is not really intended to be multi-purpose. However, there are a lot of other ways that you can use this, but not officially. It was never designed that way. It's just field expedient hacks. Now, the original multi-purpose shelter system was the German World War II Zeltbahn. And let me tell you, that thing is pretty cool. A lot of the, I guess, signature features of the Zeltbahn is also included in the Lavu. A well thought out design is always paid homage to by copying it completely or taking features from it into something new. Now, the first thing we're going to do, we're going to identify what the outside is, and the outside always has these ropes coming through the grommets. And there's also the US, which will always be on the outside. We're going to go to the side that has the double snaps, and we're going to work our way to the top grommet on both. And we'll start at the grommet, and we will snap both pair, well, each pair at a time, making sure that you've got the grommet covered by the other grommet. And I'm going to repeat that all the way down. I've got all the snaps done. Now what I'm going to do is I am going to pull this back and lay it fairly flat. Okay. Now it's time to get the stakes. Now I'm going to go ahead and stake this side down, do the two ends. With your stakes, you have a little V-notch. That V-notch always goes in toward the tent. I'm going to drive it in all the way. I want to be able to get it back out. This ground is rock hard. It's been so dry. Pull that good and tight. And the inner. Now again, I never did this when I was in the military, but it's a pretty cool way to be able to set this thing up all by yourself. You're going to need two sections of the tent poles. You're going to find the grommet, the top grommet at the ridge, and you're going to feed that through both of the grommets. On both sides. Now once you have those into position, you're going to fold the second shelter half over you adjust those to where it's good and snug. I don't know if you heard that or not, but I just ripped out my BDU trousers. That was one of the things I always had a problem with these BDUs. Every pair I owned, I ripped them out. Now I'm going to stake down this row of ropes at the grommets, and I'll do that now. Okay, now I'm going to retrieve my tent pole piece, and I'm going to attach that to the other two sections to create a complete one. I'm going to go in through the inside and feed this prong through the two grommets. I'm going to lift it up to the center. I'll do that on both sides. Now this is going to provide me with enough tension to where I can stake out the end pieces and then guy line it out. Now for this portion I do it differently than what I saw on YouTube, and I'm going to be snapping all of the snaps for the entrance flap first. I have everything snapped up. I'm going to be concentrating on the inside shelter half, which is underneath the outside shelter half. And I'm going to stake down that underside. Now, with this like this is going to be the side that you're going to open it up to get in and out of. When you button it all up, if you don't want that little bit of a flap thing coming down, you just run it over the opposite side, and then through here, it'll hold it in position well enough. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to run the guy line from the webbing loop at the top and wrap it around this. Now before I ran the guy line through, I went ahead and did the same thing on the other side that I did here. You have two parts to your guy line. You have a loose end, you have a loop. You're going to bring your loop through this side. Just feed the loose end through the loop, like the eyelet. Pull that good and snug. Pull it out. And you do a figure 8 loop around, or I guess it would be lashing around the tent stake. Just a few times. Then you get back to the side you want, and I just put a slip knot in it. After 2 or 3 loops around with that figure 8, that's going to hold really well, and it's going to be super easy to undo. Now the guy lines have all been tightened, and you're ready to move in. Now on a day like today, it's really, really warm. And if we are blessed enough to have just a little bit of a breeze going, being able to open up one of these doors and keeping it open is an absolute must. Now you can just loop on a piece of 550 cord onto your tent stake loop, run that over to the opposite side, do that figure 8 lashing just like we did on the ends. Pull that through with a slip knot. That'll hold that one there. Do the same thing to this one here. And like I said, with those slip knots, very, very fast and easy to take out that figure 8 lashing. And that little bit of a breeze will not close your tent flaps. There we go. Like I said, even a brand new shelter half can get soaked through. And you have a good constant steady rain, it can get soaked through. And if you're on the inside and you touch the inside of a canvas tent, it usually will leak in that one spot. So you want to take as many precautions as you possibly can to defeat the wet weather. The first one of which is if you are blessed enough to be able to pick your own little camp spot in the woods, if you're set up in the woods, that's fantastic. What you want to do is you want to look for a little patch of high ground. You do not want a depression to put your tent in, because if it rains, then you're sleeping in a bathtub. All of that water runs down to where you are. Even if you have to sleep on relatively flat ground, you don't have the option of, find a nice little rise. What you can do, you take your E-tool, you go around the edge of your tent, and you basically create a little drainage trench for any water to run off of your tent into that trench. And whatever is the most downhill part of your shelter, you literally dig like a little trench away from the tent to drain off someplace else. And that works really well. And if you have the time to set up a pup tent, because it does take quite a few minutes. A couple people, they can get this thing knocked out in about 5-10 minutes, no problem whatsoever. If you're doing it yourself, yeah, it takes a little bit longer than that. But if you have the time and the luxury of setting up a shelter like this anyway, definitely take the time to get the best location for you to set this thing up, and take the extra time, even if it's not 100% chance of rain, even if there's a small percentage chance of rain. Go ahead and do your little trench. It'll take an additional 5-10 minutes, and if both you guys are working together with your e-tools, you knock that down in half the time. And you run that little drainage trench off of there, and believe me, it will keep a lot of water out of your tent. The last thing I'm going to show you is how to reinforce your waterproofness with one of your ponchos. The poncho width is just about the same width as the peak of the pup tent. So you just drape this over at the sides, and there's a center grommet. Which lines up pretty dang good with the grommet that's at the peak of your pup tent. Now with this, you're going to want to tighten up your hood. You want to get that as small as you possibly can. Roll that around on itself and tie it shut. And then you can, with a piece of 550 cord, guy line out the grommet of your poncho, guy line the corner grommets, and you can even do the middle if you want to, because they all line up to the tent stakes. That right there will prevent a lot of that soaking through, except at the very bottom. If you guy line your poncho all the way out to here and you're in the woods, chances are the rain is going to be coming straight down off of the leaves and will probably stay off the bulk of the sides of your shelter. There is actually a surprising amount of room in here if all you're going to be doing is sleeping. We've got a foam rubber sleep mat, just like the one I had when I was in the Army. And fully extended, if it touches the pole, there's more than enough room for it to be in here. Now, I'm only 5'9", so someone that's a good bit taller than me is probably going to, they're going to have to sleep pretty close to the tent poles. And I know there were a couple times different things occurred, like trying to wake someone up for guard duty. They're not wanting to get up for guard duty, and they throw a little hissy fit like a little teeny tiny spoiled brat. And part of their hissy fit, they wound up breaking one of their poles. And so you do have to be conscious of this. And there's a decent amount of room in here. If you play it right and you don't have a lot of gear, especially if you don't have a frame on your rucksack, there's definitely enough room in the middle to do that. One of the things you definitely want to avoid is putting things directly against the sides of the tent if it's raining. That's not good. But if it's dry, you can put it off to the side. But you got quite a bit of room here. The bottom of my foot is probably 12 to 18 inches away from the flap down at that end. And so it's a decent amount of room. I mean, I can sit up in here okay, which is a lot better than a couple of the, I guess the one-person tents that came later, like the Katoma tent. I've got one of those too. You can't really sit up in that, at least I can't. And so it's super low profile, which makes it a little more stealthy. It's camouflage, makes it stealthy, and it's just for shelter and sleeping, keeping your stuff dry. It's pretty good. But if you had to, you know, sit in this thing for any period of time, weathering it out, you know, just you have to spend time in this. The luxury of being able to sit upright is fantastic. That's one of the things I really love about the Light Fighter. Right now, I've got my fully loaded rucksack. I've got my LB down here at my feet. Just knocked it over. And I have my rifle. All these items would pretty much be what I would have. And they're all on my half. If my tent mate were to be set up pretty much in the same way except in reverse, the ruck down there, their LBE up here, and they're sleeping in opposite direction, something like that, there would definitely be plenty of enough room to be able to get in and out and have all our gear that we need with us protected in the shelter for the night, fairly comfortably. I'm gonna just lay down real quick so you can maybe see. And a nice thing too is when you have a good bit of your kit out, you have your sleeping bag out, you have your shelter half out, and maybe a couple other little items you're going to be using during the course of the night. You can actually use your rucksack as a bit of a pillow to sleep on. And I still have about 12 to 18 inches from my right hip to the bottom edge of the shelter half. And yeah, I've got plenty of room. And for two folks my size, this is more than enough room. And it's fairly comfortable. Now you might be thinking, some of you are very acute to numbers. And I talked about there being 5 tent stakes per each half system. That would lead for one pup tent 2 extra stakes. What on earth could these stakes be for? Well, what they are for is for the guy line. The stakes that I put in for the flaps, the entrances and exits for the pup tent, that's what those are for. These are actually, you stake them out a little bit further for your guy line. We never used them. We never used extra guy lines to guy it out. So that is what the extra tent stakes are for. Okay folks, I told you I was going to show you how to roll this up the CIF way, Central Issue Facility. And you got to have your 5 tent stakes. You got to have your 3 tent poles. You got to have your guy line. And I'm including the 550 cord guy line that I used for the flap. First thing you want to do, lay it out good and flat, usually on the ground, the floor, and try to get as much debris off as you can. Next thing you're going to do, you're going to fold the shelter half sides into about halfway. You'll do that to both sides. Doesn't have to be perfect. And you're going to fold your flaps in, your tent flaps in, up to the seam, which is right there. And these will overlap. Now we're going to lay our tent stakes out and our poles on it. Now I'm going to position my tent poles first, one smack dab in the middle. Try to line it up to where it's center here. Then the other one's off to the side. You're dividing it basically into fourths. I'm going to do one tent stake here, one tent stake here, one tent stake here, one tent stake here, and one tent stake here. Now I'm going to very carefully roll the edges of my shelter half over this. Now I'm going to fold this part over, and down here I'm going to start to roll. Now, I'm ready to tie it off. Now right here down toward the bottom, I'm going to put the side with the loop on it through. I am going to pull that all the way through. Make sure we don't have any knots there. Okay, I'm going to pull that good and tight. I'm going to pull this up, hold it in place with my thumb, pull that around, loop it through here. If any of you have ever tied up a good cut of meat into a roast, this, you know exactly what I'm doing. Now I'm going to go from here over and under, pull that up and around. Make sure that's good and tight. Do the same thing again. I tell I'm doing it right because it's really good and tight. Up like that, back through. Now I'm going to go back around. Back up to where I had it. Pull it good and tight. And just slip this loose end right in that very tight little area. And then pull that through that. Now that is how the CIF rolled their shelter halves. Well folks, I want to thank you so much for sticking it out with me. Another walk for me down memory lane, and I bet from all the comments I've been receiving on all my other videos, it's been a walk down memory lane for you as well. Really have enjoyed these, probably more so than most of the videos I've ever done, and I'm looking forward to doing more. Now, I've got several more videos I'm going to be covering over hacks for the shelter half, and those will be forthcoming soon. Well folks, as always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.